Hey everyone, and welcome back to Whispering History Nights. If you're new here, settle in, dim the lights, maybe let your phone screen fade to the faintest glow. This is the place where we stroll very slowly through the stranger corners of the past until sleep sneaks up on you. If you'd like more late-night history rambles, you can always tap that little subscribe button, but no pressure. We're all about low-stakes decisions here. Tonight we're drifting back to the early 1700s, when the Atlantic Ocean was a wide, creaking stage for men who wore too much linen and made career choices that were, at best, questionable. Our companion is Bartholomew Roberts, better known as Black Bart, despite the dramatic nickname. He was, by all reliable accounts, less of a swashbuckler and more of a man who simply found himself promoted to pirate, captain because no one else wanted the job. A very relatable start. Roberts was a Welshman, born in 1682 in a place where the sea air was damp and the social mobility was frankly minimal. He started as an honest sailor, which in the early 18th century meant long hours, erratic pay, and enough salt in your diet to pickle a respectable horse. In 1719, while working aboard the Princess off the coast of West Africa, the ship was captured by pirates. The pirates offered the usual career opportunity: join us or stay behind. Roberts, being practical and perhaps mildly bored, joined them. A few weeks later, their captain was killed, and, because of course he was, Roberts was elected captain. Sometimes the sea just hands you a resume upgrade. By the summer of 1721, Roberts was preparing for a long crossing of the Atlantic from the humid harbors of West Africa toward the Caribbean. This is the voyage we'll follow, day by unhurried day, like a ship's log written in an unusually calm voice. There will be no sudden storms or heroic sword fights, just wind, rope, and the slow turning of the earth beneath a very patient crew. The morning of departure was heavy with the smell of tar and damp wood. The crew moved with the kind of efficient lethargy only experienced sailors can manage. Everything done correctly, nothing done quickly. Roberts inspected the rigging with his usual understated precision. He favored black coats and a feathered hat, which sounds dashing until you remember the West African heat. Still, fashion is pain, even at sea. The ship records suggest it was the Royal Fortune was loaded with the basic pirate grocery list: salted beef that could double as roofing material, hardtack biscuits resembling geological samples, barrels of fresh water that would be slightly less fresh within days, and rum. Always rum. The crew also carried spare rope, extra sails, and a small library of grievances about the last time someone rotated the water barrels as the tide eased them away from the coast. The sound of gulls faded into the wider hush of the Atlantic. For the first few days, the weather was obligingly bland, a steady trade wind, small whitecaps, nothing worth a dramatic journal entry. Perfect conditions for insomnia-friendly narration. Roberts kept a strict but oddly democratic routine. Pirate crews voted on major decisions and shared loot according to an agreed-upon code. A level of workplace equality that many 21st century offices still haven't achieved. Of course, equality has limits when the captain wears the best hat and gets a slightly larger share of the rum. But the crew seemed content, and contentment is a rare maritime commodity. Let's drift along the deck. The morning watch begins with the faint squeal of the helm as the wheel is adjusted by a degree or two. Canvas sighs overhead. Salt settles on everything's skin, rope, thoughts. Below, in the dim belly of the ship, men sleep in hammocks that sway with the rhythm of the sea. One snores like a polite saw. Another mutters about dice games lost 3 ports ago. Outside, the ocean stretches in every direction, unburred. By the 5th day, the wind slackens. The sails droop with the resigned air of laundry on a windless line. Roberts orders a slight change of course to catch a more cooperative breeze. A sailor named Evans records the latitude with quiet satisfaction, as if noting the exact location of a nap. Meals are a gentle affair. Breakfast is ship's biscuit softened in watered rum. Lunch is more biscuit, possibly a sliver of salted pork if someone feels festive. Dinner is biscuit again, because creativity was not the Atlantic's strong suit. The men chew slowly, perhaps from caution, perhaps from the simple understanding that there's nowhere else to be. Night falls early at sea. The horizon melts into a soft charcoal grey, and lanterns flicker like tired fireflies. The watch changes. Someone hums a tune about home, which may or may not be Wales. The stars appear clear, innumerable, indifferent. Roberts, for all his practical cynicism, occasionally stares upward as if consulting them for management advice. A week in they pass, a lonely merchant vessel, Dutch by the look of her rigging. Roberts signals a polite inquiry with a lantern. The merchant captain replies in kind. No chase follows. The merchant ship has nothing of interest, and the pirates are not in the mood for cardio. The ocean closes behind them as though nothing happened. The crew's conversation drifts toward small grievances. Whose turn it is to scrape barnacles, whether the cook is secretly watering the rum, and the eternal question of why rope always tangles when you least expect it. Roberts listens, offers a mild comment or two, and returns to his charts. Leadership, he believes, is mostly about letting people complain until they tire themselves out. Midway across the Atlantic, they encounter what sailors call a doldrum, a patch of flat, breathless air. The ship rocks gently, going nowhere in particular. Days blend together like oversteeped tea. Some men play cards with slow deliberation. Others carve small shapes from bits of wood. One writes a letter he knows he'll never send. Roberts maintains a steady calm. He orders careful rationing of fresh water and speaks of catching the next breeze with the confidence of someone negotiating with a very large, invisible cat. At night, the sea glows faintly with phosphorescent plankton. Each ripple shines for a heartbeat before fading. It's the sort of quiet spectacle that makes even hardened pirates pause, then immediately pretend they didn't. By the 3rd week, a restless wind returns, and the ship eases forward again. The crew responds with the subdued cheer of people who know better than to celebrate too loudly in case the weather hears them. They adjust sails, check the compass, and resume the slow conversation that is crossing an ocean. Roberts keeps his journal, though few pages survive. He notes the latitude each noon, the state of the crew, and occasionally a comment about the everlasting biscuit. There is no mention of fear, only the mild annoyance of a man who would prefer fresher bread. A month after departure, the first faint scent of land drifts across the deckworm, green, almost imperceptible. Someone claims it's imagination. Another swears it's real. Either way, spirits lift a little. But that, dear listeners, is a moment for the next section of our long, deliberate voyage. For now, let's stay with the sound of the water against the hull, the slow creak of timbers, and the endless patience of the ocean. Let the ship carry you forward at its own unhurried pace, until your thoughts drift like sails in the midnight breeze. Welcome back to Whispering History Nights. If you've drifted off once or twice since part 1, that's perfectly fine. The ocean hasn't gone anywhere, and neither have we. Take a breath, let the day fall away, and rejoin this unhurried voyage with Captain Bartholomew Black Bart. Roberts and the quietly restless crew of the Royal Fortune. The faint scent of land that teased the crew a few evenings ago proves to be mostly wishful thinking. Morning brings nothing but the wide Atlantic, its grey surface heaving like a very slow sigh. A few gulls appear, then disappear again, leaving the men to debate whether gulls can smell rum from 100 miles. Opinions differ. No one bothers to resolve it. Roberts begins the day with his usual understated routine. He inspects the rigging, checks the compass, and notes their latitude with a neatness bordering on smug. The crew watches him with mild respect, the kind reserved for someone who never forgets a decimal. Leadership, in Roberts's view, is 90% keeping your pencil dry. The wind is light but steady, a soft push from the east. Sails billow lazily, ropes creak, and the ship moves with the patient confidence of a cat stretching in the sun. The men settle into familiar tasks, splicing lines, mending sails, arguing about whose turn it is to scrape the deck. Piracy, despite the branding, is mostly maintenance. Food remains the usual culinary adventure. The biscuits have achieved a geological hardness that inspires both respect and dread. One sailor taps a piece against the railing. The railing loses the contest. Salted beef, meanwhile, continues to double as both dinner and potential building material. The cook suggests soaking it longer. The crew suggests throwing it overboard and apologizing to the fish. Compromise is reached when someone remembers they have nutmeg, a tiny luxury that almost tastes like variety. Evenings bring a soft hush. Lanterns sway gently, casting tired halos of light. A fiddler produces a tune so slow it might actually be in reverse. Roberts listens, half smiling, as if contemplating the absurdity of men who risk death at sea, yet argue passionately about biscuit density midweek. A passing squall brushes the horizon. Dark clouds build, then think better of it and dissolve. The ship receives a few lazy drops of range, enough to clean the deck and give the men an excuse to stretch their vocabulary of nautical complaints. Someone claims the rain tastes faintly of iron. Someone else suggests that everything tastes faintly of iron after 5 weeks at sea. The discussion drifts into silence. On the 6th night of this second month, the moon rises low and yellow, painting the water with a path of tarnished light. Plankton sparkle in its wake, a quiet fireworks display for an audience half asleep. One of the younger sailors, barely 20 and missing 2 teeth to a dice game, leans on the rail and mutters that the sea looks like a sky you could fall into. No one answers. It's the kind of thought best left to the night. A day later, the lookout spots a distant sail. Through the long glass, it proves to be a merchantman, likely Portuguese. Roberts gives the smallest of shrugs. They have provisions enough, and the merchant is riding low in the water, probably carrying nothing more glamorous than timber or dried fish. The Royal Fortune adjusts course slightly, not out of fear but sheer lack of enthusiasm for extra paperwork. The crew grumbles for form's sake, then returns to the serious business of doing very little. Time at sea stretches strangely. Hours slip by like beads on an endless string. Men nap in short shrifts. Cards appear and disappear, and someone begins carving a small wooden gull for reasons he refuses to explain. Roberts keeps his journal. Entries remain as dry as ever. Latitude noted. Biscuit acceptable. Wind constant. There is a quiet comfort in such understatement. By the middle of the 7th week, the trade winds freshen. The ship leans into the gust with a creak that sounds almost like relief. Speed increases to a stately 5 knots, positively exhilarating by Atlantic standards. The crew responds with the restrained cheer of men who know the ocean does not reward gloating. With better wind comes more conversation. Topics include the merits of various Caribbean ports, the likelihood of finding decent tobacco in Barbados, and whether rum tastes different in Jamaica. Someone insists it does. Someone else points out that after 2 months of salt air, everything will taste like victory anyway. Roberts, as always, listens more than he speaks. He has the air of a man who enjoys the illusion of democracy, while quietly steering the ship exactly where he intended all along. When asked which island they'll head for first, he answers only, "The wind will tell us," which is both true and entirely unhelpful. A brief rain squall arrives without warning one night, warm and heavy. The men laugh as they work the pumps, letting the fresh water rinse weeks of salt from skin and deck. For an hour, the ship feels almost new. Then the clouds drift away, leaving stars so bright they look close enough to pluck. Even the most cynical sailor pauses, though he will later claim he was merely checking the rigging. The following days pass in a kind of pleasant monotony. The sea is a shifting palette of blues and greys. The air grows steadily warmer. Flying fish skip across the bow in sudden silver flashes, startling more than one half-dozing lookout. Rum rations remain steady, a decision universally applauded. At last, a thin line of green smudges the western horizon. The Caribbean. It appears first as a rumor, then a promise, then a solid silhouette against the setting sun. After nearly 2 months of nothing but water, the sight of land feels almost indecently vivid. Roberts allows himself the smallest of smiles. There will be ports to visit, ships to chase or ignored markets to quietly exploit. But for now, he simply stands at the rail, hands clasped behind his back, as if greeting an old acquaintance he never particularly liked. The crew's excitement builds in slow ripples. There is no shouting, just a gradual straightening of spines, a renewed attention to lines and sails. Even the biscuits seem to crumble with a little more enthusiasm as night falls. The smell of land-warm earth, distant flowers, a hint of smoke reaches the deck. It mingles with the salt air like a promise of something almost comfortable. The men breathe it in, eyes half closed, as though the very scent might carry them the final miles. Captain Roberts gives quiet orders: reduce sail, maintain a careful watch, and for heaven's sake, keep the rum under lock. The Royal Fortune glides toward its first Caribbean anchorage with the unhurried grace of a ship that knows it has already won the race simply by arriving. The stars wheel overhead. The sea laps gently at the hull. Somewhere beyond the dark outline of the islands, a night bird calls a thin, questioning note that fades into the vast Atlantic silence. And so our long drift across the ocean ends, not with cannon fire or desperate chase, but with the quiet satisfaction of a voyage completed. Tomorrow will bring negotiations, supplies, perhaps the occasional ill-advised adventure. But tonight belongs to the stillness of arrival. Let that thought carry you off like the tide, steady, inevitable, and entirely at peace. Welcome back to Whispering History Nights. If you've been listening from the start, you've already crossed an ocean in the slow company of Captain Bartholomew Black Bart Roberts. If you're just joining us, no worries. Our pace is so gentle you can climb aboard at any point. settle a little deeper into the pillow. The Caribbean night is warm, and the story barely stirs. The Royal Fortune glides along the lee of the first island like a cat considering a new windowsill. The air smells of damp greenery and wood smoke, with a faint note of fermenting sugarcane that makes the crew lift their heads like hopeful hounds. After weeks of biscuit and salted beef, anything that isn't beige is cause for celebration. Robert stands at the rail, his black coat catching the moonlight in a way that would impress exactly no one except perhaps himself. He studies the shoreline with the detached interest of a man reading a dull but necessary letter. This is the Lesser Antilles small islands, scattered like careless crumbs. Each one is a potential harbor, a potential trap, and a guaranteed opportunity for mild paperwork. The crew whispers among themselves about which port might hold the best rum or the most gullible merchants. Roberts listens without comment. Leadership, he knows, is largely about letting people dream while you quietly decide something more. Practical, they steer toward a quiet bay on Dominica, dropping anchor with the slow grace of a ship that has absolutely nowhere else to be. A few lanterns flicker on shore, but no one calls out. The Caribbean night hums with insects and the distant crash of surf against reefs. A lone drummer somewhere inland keeps a lazy rhythm that might be music or might just be boredom expressed through percussion at dawn. A small shore party rows in 4 fresh water and, if fortune allows, fruit. The men return with barrels filled and a handful of plantains, triumphant as if they'd discovered El Dorado. One sailor tries to fashion a necklace of bright leaves. A questionable fashion statement, but at least different from rope. Roberts oversees the operation with his usual understated efficiency. He keeps careful notes on how much water they take and how much rum mysteriously disappears during the process. The Caribbean, he reminds them, is not a place to get careless. Mosquitoes carry fevers, rival pirates carry grudges, and colonial governors carry paperwork sharp enough to draw blood. From Dominica they drift south, sails trimmed to catch the easy trade winds. The islands slide by in slow procession. Martinique, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, each presents a slightly different shade of green, a slightly different scent of soil and smoke. Each harbors its own tiny dramas of colonial rivalry, French against English, against whoever happens to be unlucky that week. The crew views these politics with polite disinterest. Sugar is sugar, rum is rum, and a merchant ship is simply an opportunity wearing another nation's flag. Meals improve marginally. The plantains become a treasured ingredient, diced into the eternal biscuit stew. Someone claims they taste like hope. Someone else says they taste like bananas pretending to be serious. Both are correct. Evenings settle into a rhythm of low conversation, and the occasional song so slow it feels like the ship itself might fall asleep. The fiddler plays again, this time a tune that might once have been lively but now drifts like smoke over calm water. Stars sprawl across the sky in a brightness no European city could match. The crew lies on deck, heads propped on coiled rope, quietly counting constellations they can't name. A week later, they reach the waters near Barbados. Here the scent of sugarcane thickens, sweet and heavy. Plantations line the shore, their fires sending thin columns of smoke into the evening air. Robert keeps the Royal Fortune at a discreet distance. Barbados is heavily patrolled. British naval vessels lurk like particularly humorless sharks. Still, a small skiff goes ashore under cover of dusk. They return with news of prices rum, cheaper than expected, tobacco dearer, and gossip plentiful. One sailor reports that the governor is obsessed with new regulations for weighing molasses. Another claims he overheard a merchant complaining about the shortage of decent ink. These are the thrilling details of Caribbean bureaucracy, and the crew listens with the mild interest of men grateful for any story that isn't about biscuits. Roberts notes it all, his face giving nothing away. He is less interested in loot than in balance. Enough supplies to keep the crew content. Enough distance to avoid unnecessary cannon fire. And enough subtlety to slip away before anyone remembers to be angry. From Barbados they swing west toward the larger islands, following currents that feel as steady as breath. The sea here is a deeper blue, almost velvet under the sun. Flying fish leap alongside, small silver commas punctuating the day. The air grows warmer, the night softer, the crew lazier in the best possible way. Small arguments break out mostly about card games and the relative merits of various ports' rum. One sailor insists that Jamaican rum has a personality, while Barbados rum merely has a tax. Another counters that all rum tastes like victory when you haven't seen land in a week. The debate drifts on, unresolved, like everything else, at C. Roberts, meanwhile, studies his charts and the sky with the calm of a man who has already chosen his next destination. He allows the crew to speculate Tortuga, perhaps, or the quiet coves of Grenada. He offers no confirmation, only a faint smile that suggests the wind will indeed tell them. Eventually, one lazy afternoon, a merchant brig appears on the horizon. Through the long glass it proves to be French, carrying cargo stacked high. The crew brightens. Roberts considers. After a long silence, he orders a gentle pursuit, nothing urgent. Just a polite increase in speed, as though they might coincidentally arrive alongside Dot as dusk falls. The Royal Fortune eases close enough for lantern signals. Roberts hails the merchant captain with impeccable courtesy, inquiring about water and news from Europe. The merchant, perhaps reassured by the absence of immediate cannon fire, responds in kind. A short exchange of pleasantries follows. The Frenchman offers a small cask of wine in exchange for some of Roberts's plantains, which, after weeks at sea, might as well be gemstones. The trade is made without fuss. The two ships drift apart, each crew waving with the languid politeness of neighbors exchanging borrowed tools. The pirates savor the wine that night, sipping slowly as if stretching the taste might lengthen the memory. Someone raises a quiet toast to voyages that stay boring. Everyone agrees that is the best kind. As the days slide by, the Caribbean reveals itself as both paradise and persistent inconvenience. Harbors are warm and fragrant, but often shallow. Supplies are abundant, but come with the inevitable negotiations involving tariffs, bribes, and the unique personalities of colonial officials. Roberts handles these with his signature calm, offering gifts of sugar or small coins when necessary, retreating when the paperwork begins to smell of trouble. The crew grows comfortable in the rhythm of island hopping, morning light on turquoise water, long afternoons repairing sails or exchanging gossip with local traders, evenings heavy with the scent of hibiscus and wood smoke. It is piracy reduced to its most peaceful form, a life of quiet motion and steady horizons. One evening, anchored off a sheltered cove in Grenada, Roberts walks the deck alone. The moon casts a pale road across the water, and the only sound is the occasional slap of a fish against the hull. He pauses, hands behind his back, and gazes toward the dark silhouette of the island. Perhaps he thinks of Wales, or of the unlikely path that brought him here. Perhaps he thinks of nothing at all. The sea, after all, has a way of emptying the mind. Below deck, the crew settles into hammocks. The smell of tar and tropical flowers mingles in the warm air. Someone hums a tune learned from a Martinique trader, a melody with no clear beginning or end. Lanterns sway gently, their light barely touching the wooden beams. And so another day of this slow Caribbean drift ends not with cannon fire, not with treasure counted, but with the soft certainty of tides and stars. The Royal Fortune rocks in time with the ocean's patient heartbeat, waiting for morning, waiting for whatever destination the wind chooses next. Let that steady motion guide you now. Imagine the creak of timbers, the salt on the air, the quiet shuffle of waves against the hull. Sleep, like the sea, will find you without hurry. Welcome back to Whispering History Nights. If you're still awake, congratulations on outlasting half the crew of the Royal Fortune, who would already be snoring in their hammocks by now. If you've drifted off once or twice, even better, you're doing this exactly right. Tonight, we continue our unhurried drift through Captain Bartholomew Black Bart Roberts's Caribbean wanderings. A chapter of piracy so peaceful it barely counts as crime. Dawn slips across the cove like a cautious cat. The sky turns the color of watered-down apricot, and the scent of damp hibiscus mingles with salt and wood smoke. Roberts rises early, because of course he does, his black coat perfectly brushed despite the humid air's best efforts. He walks the deck with a mug of coffeeus. Even pirates knew the magic of roasted beans, though the brew here tastes more like ambition than comfort. Below, the crew wakes in reluctant waves. Hammocks creak, men stretch, and someone curses quietly at a rope burn earned in a dream. Breakfast is a careful compromise between the ship's biscuit, indestructible as ever, and the newfound joy of island fruit. A sailor named Finch slices plantains with the solemnity of a surgeon, as though each piece might decide the day's fortune. Roberts joins the meal only briefly, listening to the small debates that make a crew a family, whether papaya truly tastes like a fruit or a botanical prank, whether the latest barrel of rum is too sweet, or just sweet enough to disguise the water's faint metallic temps. No decision is reached. No decision needs to be dot. By mid-morning, a shore party rows across the glassy water. Their goal is refreshingly dull. More fresh water, a few sacks of root vegetables, and perhaps a coil of hemp rope if the price is reasonable. They carry small coins for trade and an equal supply of practiced smiles. Grenada's colonial governor is British and reportedly fussy about strangers, but the island's merchants are pragmatic. A cask of sugar is a cask of sugar, no matter who pays. The men return hours later, arms full of quiet victories, yams, green plantains, a small bundle of cinnamon sticks traded from a market woman who had no idea she'd negotiated with pirates. One sailor boasts of having haggled the price down by complimenting her parrot. Whether the parrot noticed remains unknown. Roberts inspects the goods with mild satisfaction and tucks the cinnamon carefully into the ship's stores. Spices, after all, can turn even hardtack into something approaching optimism. With supplies renewed, the Royal Fortune eases away from Grenada's lush slopes and slides southward. The wind is soft, the sea a velvet blue streaked with silver light. Flying fish leap in brief arcs, as though auditioning for a more energetic story. The crew lounges on deck, half dozing, half playing cards with a deck so worn the King of Spades looks mildly embarrassed. Robert spends much of the day with his charts, pencil scratching steadily. He notes currents, wind direction, and a few passing thoughts on the stubbornness of rope. His logbook is a masterpiece of understatement. Course steady. Biscuit adequate. Crew mildly argumentative about card rules. It's the sort of diary entry guaranteed to lull even the most determined listener into drowsiness. As evening falls, the sky deepens into indigo, and the smell of cinnamon drifts faintly from the galley. The cook has risked a small experiment stewing yams with a hint of spice. The result is met with cautious approval and one theatrical sigh of pleasure. For a crew accustomed to flavorless grey meals, this is nearly a festival. The next stop is Tobago, a smaller island with a reputation for quiet trade and even quieter officials. They drop anchor off a secluded bay where palms lean toward the water like nosy neighbors. The air here carries a sweet, resinous scent pine mixed with the warm dust of distant fires. Roberts leads a small group ashore. He wears his usual black coat and feathered hat, an outfit both impractical and oddly reassuring. The locals, a mix of traders and fishermen, greet the visitors with wary curiosity but no alarm. Coins change hands. Barrels of water are filled. A fisherman offers a basket of limes in exchange for a length of good rope. Roberts accepts, quietly pleased. Scurvy, after all, is the enemy even a pirate captain can respect. Back on board, the limes are greeted with enthusiasm bordering on reverence. A young sailor named Hale suggests squeezing the juice into the evening's rum ration, a proposal that earns universal acclaim. The first sip is a revelation. Tart, bright, almost shocking after weeks of salt and smoke. For a brief, citrus-scented moment, the Atlantic hardships feel like someone else's story. The following days bring a change in the sky. Thin clouds streak the horizon, high and pale, like brushstrokes on blue silk. The wind freshens, then fades, then freshens again. Old sailors glance upward and mutter about patterns they claim to recognize but can't quite explain. Roberts listens, nods, and orders a modest reefing of sails precaution rather than panic. He is not a man for drama. The crew follows with the quiet efficiency of men who know that a little preparation beats heroic scrambling later. The sea responds with gentle rollers, long swells that lift the ship in slow motion. Lanterns swing in wide arcs at night, casting wandering shadows across the deck. The sound of water against the hull deepens to a steady, breathing rhythm. It is not threatening, just the ocean reminding everyone who is in charge. Late one morning, a Dutch merchant sloop appears on the horizon, her sails bright against the pale sky. Through the long glass, Roberts notes her easy motion and lack of escort. He considers the options with the same calm he applies to breakfast choices. A quiet decision is made. Approach, but politely. The Royal Fortune closes the distance at an unhurried pace. When within hailing range, Roberts calls out a courteous greeting in serviceable Dutch. The merchant captain, perhaps surprised by the civility of men who are clearly pirates, responds in kind. The conversation drifts toward trade. The Dutchman offers coffee beans and a small keg of butter in exchange for cinnamon and a few of those precious limes. Roberts agrees. The exchange is completed with a minimum of fuss and a maximum of nods. That night, the crew enjoys coffee strong enough to wake the most, determined napper and butter soft enough to make the eternal biscuits almost friendly. Someone raises a toast to civilized piracy. Everyone drinks to that week's pass in this manner-measured sails. Small trades, slow meals, and the endless shimmer of blue water. The crew grows sun-browned and pleasantly languid. Arguments become gentler. Even the fiddler adopts a tempo so slow it could be mistaken for tuning. Robert spends his evenings on deck, hands clasped behind his back, gazing at stars that appear close enough to touch. Perhaps he thinks of Wales, of a youth spent among grey hills and colder seas. Perhaps he thinks of nothing at all. The sea, after all, is an excellent blank page. Below, the men drift into sleep. The scent of coffee lingers faintly, mingling with tar and warm wood. Hammocks sway in time with the tide's quiet pulse. Somewhere in the dark, a night bird calls a soft, questioning note swallowed by the vast Caribbean hush. And so the Royal Fortune continues its leisurely circuit of the islands. A pirate ship that often feels more like a floating village. No cannon roars, no desperate chase interrupts the rhythm. There is only wind, water, and the quiet art of living between one horizon and the next. Let that image settle with you now. The creak of rope, the faint tang of salt and citrus, the steady breath of the ocean beneath an infinite sky. Sleep, like the tide, will come when it chooses, slow, certain, and utterly without hurry. Welcome again to Whispering History Nights, where we keep sailing long after most listeners have surrendered to sleep. If you're still awake, imagine the deck beneath your feet warm wood, faintly sticky with salt and the low hiss of the Caribbean night. We pick up with Captain Bartholomew, Black Bart Roberts, as the Royal Fortune turns her bow west, drifting toward Jamaica with all the urgency of a cloud. The morning departure is almost ceremonial. A soft breeze teases the palms while the last of the shore party rows back, their oars sliding into the water with unhurried grace. The island shrinks behind them, its green hills fading into a watercolor blur. Robert stands at the rail, coat immaculate as ever, though a single stray hair dares to move in the wind. He ignores it, naturally. The ship's sails fill with a gentle sigh. No shouted orders, just quiet motions. A tug on a halyard, a knot retied. The subtle teamwork of men who could manage this ship half asleep and often do. The first stretch westward is pure ocean. The sea offers an endless palette of blues. Near the hull, deep sapphire, farther out, streaked with milky trails where the sunlight plays. Flying fish continue their impromptu acrobatics, earning only mild applause from a sailor too drowsy to care. Meals become a ritual of pleasant sameness. Biscuits softened with butter from the Dutch trade, a hint of lime squeezed into water. The crew's quiet rebellion against scurvy. One man experiments with sprinkling cinnamon on everything, from porridge to salted fish, claiming it adds mystery. It mostly adds confusion. But no one protests. Evenings are for cards and idle speculation. Will Jamaica offer better rum than Grenada? Will anyone remember the rules of the card game before dawn? The arguments drift like the ship itself, never reaching conclusion. By midweek, clouds thicken on the horizon. They are not menacing, just heavy, slow-moving masses like folds of grey velvet. Robert studies them with the patience of someone who's seen real storms and refuses to be impressed. A brief rain arrives, soft and deliberate. The crew tilts their faces upward, welcoming the coolness. Buckets are set out to catch fresh water. The sound of drops on wood, a gentle percussion beneath the murmuring sea. After an hour, the sky clears with an almost apologetic glow, leaving the deck washed and the air smelling faintly of wet rope and citrus. A few days later, a small Spanish fishing vessel crosses their path. It flies no guns, only a ragged sail and an attitude of cautious curiosity. Roberts hails them in careful Spanish, offering a trade of coffee for fresh fish. The fishermen, perhaps amused by this excessively polite pirate, agree. The handover is almost comically civil. Baskets of snapper and grouper passed across. A small pouch of coffee beans returned. One fisherman offers a shy grin and a recipe for cooking the fish with lime and a little seawater. The royal fortunes. Cook takes notes as though receiving royal instructions. That night the galley smells of simple perfection: fish, grilled over low coals, a dash of lime, a hint of smoke. The crew dines like kings, or at least like kings who appreciate minimalism, as the voyage stretches on. The sky grows increasingly extravagant. The moon rises late, leaving hours where only the Milky Way lights the deck. Lanterns swing gently, their glow a soft counterpoint to the infinite shimmer above. Roberts often stands alone at the prow, silhouette crisp against the starlight. He rarely speaks during these vigils. Perhaps he calculates currents, or simply counts constellations. Either way, his quiet presence steadies the crew more than any shouted command. Below deck, hammocks sway with the ship's breath. The gentle slap of waves against the hull becomes the night's heartbeat. If dreams come, they come slow and heavy, like the tide itself, toward the end of the second week. Faint smudges of land appear at dawn first, just suggestion, then undeniable green rising from the horizon. Jamaica, lush and sunlit, waits with its tangled history of sugar, slavery, and restless trade. The crew perks up, though only slightly. After weeks of ocean, their excitement is more of a slow grin than a cheer. Roberts reviews his chart one last time, noting reefs and shallows with a pencil stub worn almost to nothing. The wind carries the scent of distant vegetation, warm earth, and something sweet, perhaps molasses, perhaps imagination. Parrots wheel above the shoreline, their calls a sudden riot against the ship's quiet rhythm, rather than head for bustling. Port Royal, with its busy harbour masters and even busier roomers, Roberts selects a smaller bay on the island's north side. It is a place of gentle waves and dense foliage, where the only witnesses are herons and the occasional, mildly suspicious goat. Anchoring here feels almost like secrecy. The crew lowers the longboats in deliberate silence, as though the forest might object to too much noise. They bring ashore barrels to refill with fresh water and a modest list of trade items: salt, fruit, and if fortune allows, a little molasses for the cook's next experiment. The islanders they meet are a mix of small traders and fishermen, used to travelers but rarely curious. Coins and quiet words are exchanged. A basket of sugarcane changes hands with a smile and a shrug. No one asks questions. No one needs to dot. By nightfall, the ship rests easy in the sheltered cove. The air is heavy with the scent of cane and damp earth. Crickets provide an unhurried soundtrack, joined now and then by the soft splash of fish breaking the surface. The men lounge on deck, sipping diluted rum sweetened with the day's sugar. A few chew on sticks of raw cane, marveling at the unexpected burst of sweetness. One declares it the finest dessert of his life, though he has very little competition to compare. Roberts allows himself a rare smile. The voyage west has been uneventful, almost suspiciously so. But for a captain who values order over chaos, uneventful is precisely the point. So the Royal Fortune lingers in its Jamaican hideaway. Sails furled, crew content, the Caribbean night stretching endless and kind. No cannon fire, no desperate chase, just the slow creak of timbers and the quiet companionship of men who have learned that even pirates can enjoy a peaceful drift. Let that scene carry you toward rest. The distant scent of sugarcane, the hush of warm water against the hull, and above it all, the soft, unbroken arc of Caribbean stars. Welcome back to Whispering History Nights, where we sail through history at a pace so slow even the ocean might yawn. If you're still with me, settle a little deeper into whatever counts as your hammock. Tonight we follow Captain Bartholomew "Black Bart" Roberts as the Royal Fortune eases away from Jamaica and begins a quiet loop along the Spanish Main along warm coastline that kept European empires awake at night, even when nothing much happened. Departure comes just after dawn. Mist clings to the hills, and the smell of sugarcane lingers like a polite farewell. The crew raises anchor with the efficiency of men who have repeated the same motions 1,000 times. No shouted orders, just the creak of rope and the soft slap of water against the hull. The ship turns southeast, sails filling with a steady breeze. The Caribbean stretches ahead like a sheet of molten glass. Parrots squabble in the trees on shore, their voices fading as Jamaica sinks behind the horizon. Breakfast is quiet, hard biscuit dipped in the last of the sweetened coffee, a luxury that still earns a murmur of approval from half-awake sailors. Roberts takes his usual place near the wheel, coat immaculate, hat tilted at the exact angle of indifference. He notes the bearing in his log, course for the Spanish Main. Weather fair, crew cheerful enough. It is an entry so calm it could cure insomnia on its own. The first week is all slow rhythm. Wind steady, sea an endless, patient blue. The ship glides along the southern edge of the Caribbean like a traveling shadow. Meals remain modestly inventive. The cook experiments with sugarcane juice in the porridge, which one sailor declares almost dessert. Another adds a pinch of cinnamon to salted fish, producing something that tastes vaguely like ambition. The crew approves with minimal enthusiasm, high praise. At sea, card games continue. Arguments over rules persist, but never rise above a low murmur. One evening, a sailor tries to invent a new game and falls asleep explaining it. No one complains. By midweek, the faint shape of the Venezuelan coast emerges on the horizon. Low mountains hazy in the distance, their color a muted slate beneath the afternoon sun. The smell changes, first less salt, more earth, a faint sweetness that suggests rivers meeting the sea. Roberts orders the ship to keep a respectful distance from shore. Spanish ports lie hidden among the inlets, and while the Royal Fortune could outrun most patrols, he prefers not to bother. He has no interest in drama, only in smooth sailing and perhaps a quiet trade. Through the long glass, the men spot fishing canoes gliding near the reefs. Their paddlers glance up, see the black-sailed ship, and continue on without alarm. It seems even the locals have grown used to the idea of a polite pirate. Near the Gulf of Paria, a small coastal trader appears barely more than a large canoe fitted with a lateen sail. Roberts signals with a flag, the maritime equivalent of a raised eyebrow. The trader responds with an amiable wave. They meet mid-morning in a calm stretch of water. The conversation is a patchwork of languages, a little Spanish, a little Portuguese, a lot of hand gestures. The exchange is simple dried fish for a handful of coffee beans and a few bright peppers. The peppers earn cautious respect from the crew, who debate whether they are food or weapon. That night, the galley glows with cautious excitement. The cook tries the peppers in a stew so mild it could barely wake a mouse. But the flavor is a small miracle after weeks of salted sameness. A sailor murmurs, spicy, as though testing an unfamiliar word. After the brief contact, the Royal Fortune drifts westward along the long arc of coast. Days slide by with the same slow grace, dawn gilding the water, noon a glare of white heat, evenings a slow fade to violet. At night the stars are so bright they cast faint shadows. Lanterns sway with the ship's motion, painting soft circles on the deck. Some of the crew lie on their backs, naming constellations with quiet certainty and occasional invention. One insists a crooked cluster of stars is shaped like a rum bottle. No one argues. Roberts keeps his silent watch at the rail. The only sound is the hush of the sea and the occasional sigh of rigging. His log remains perfectly bland, course steady. No incidents worth ink. A triumph of understatement. Toward the end of the second week, the spires of Cartagena glint faintly in the haze. The great Spanish fortress, hub of gold fleets and naval patrols, lies just beyond the curve of the bay. Its harbor is busy even at dawn, sails crowding the water like white petals. Roberts regards it from miles away, then turns the ship gently south. There is no point in testing Spain's famously touchy harbor guards. Besides, the crew shows no appetite for mischief. They are content with calm seas and the lingering taste of peppers. Life aboard settles into the slow work of upkeep. Sails are patched with patient stitches. Deck planks are scrubbed until they gleam in the sun. Ropes are coiled and recoiled, the repetitive motion oddly soothing. A carpenter spends an entire afternoon smoothing a single rough rail, explaining that perfection is a form of luck. Another sailor experiments with braiding spare line into decorative knots. By evening, a small gallery of rope art decorates the mainmast. Admired in silence, meals follow the same deliberate pattern. Fish when the lines are lucky, biscuit when they are not. The peppers appear sparingly, a treasure rationed with the seriousness of coin. One night, a warm rain sweeps across the deck, sudden and soft as a sigh. Lanterns dim, ropes glisten, and the air smells of clean earth. The crew tilts their faces upward, welcoming the rinse after weeks of sun and salt. The sound is hypnotic, countless drops meeting the sea in a steady, endless percussion. Even the most talkative sailor falls quiet. Roberts notes simply, rain. Welcome. Then he closes the log and stands for a long while beneath the falling sky. When morning comes, the rain has vanished, leaving a world rinsed and shining. The Royal Fortune resumes her westward drift, sails swelling gently in a cooperative breeze. Ahead lies the long curve of the Central American coast, a ribbon of green and gold under the relentless sun. There is no rush, no grand destination. The ship moves as though time itself has loosened its gripper, floating village content to follow the ocean's patient breath. So we leave Roberts and his crew sliding quietly along the Spanish Main. Their days marked by subtle exchanges, soft rain, and the endless blue of a forgiving sea. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the low creak of timbers, the faint hiss of water against the hull, and the unhurried heartbeat of a voyage with nowhere in particular to be. Let that rhythm carry you toward rest, slow, steady, and as timeless as the tide. Welcome once again to Whispering History Nights, the channel where history drifts by like a slow tide. If you've stayed awake through 6 parts of Captain Bartholomew, Black Bart Roberts's unhurried Caribbean wander, I salute your stamina. But if you've dozed off and returned only now, you've missed nothing dramatic, because nothing dramatic insists on happening. Tonight we follow the Royal Fortune as she begins a gradual northward sweep, tracing the long arc from the Spanish Main back toward the open Atlantic. Think of this as the return half of a circle drawn so slowly that even the ocean barely notices. The decision to head north is not announced with any flourish. Roberts simply closes his logbook one evening, looks at the compass the next morning, and instructs the helmsman to bear slightly starboard. The crew nods as if they were already expecting it. The Royal Fortune eases her bow toward deeper waters, sails catching a cooperative breeze that smells faintly of rain warmed cedar from the receding coast. Breakfast is the usual quiet affair, biscuits softened with yesterday's coffee, a few slices of dried fish, and a cautious sprinkling of pepper from the ever-dwindling stash. Someone observes that the peppers have lasted longer than most marriages. No one argues. The seas grow wider, the horizon cleaner. Gone are the comforting silhouettes of jungle hills and fishing canoes. Now the world is a broad blue dome where sky and water trade places until you stop caring which is which. The ship rolls in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Lanterns sway like pendulums. Hammocks rock with the same patient timing. It's a movement so even that a man could set his pulse by it, and some of the crew probably do. Meals take on a meditative quality. The cook, in a fit of optimism, attempts a thin pepper sauce to brighten the fish. The result is both memorable and brief. The crew agrees it is best appreciated in silence. On the fourth afternoon, a sail appears on the horizon, a lone merchant brigantine traveling east. Roberts raises his glass, studies the stranger, and sets it down with mild disinterest. "Let them keep their course," he murmurs, as though discussing the weather. The crew barely glances up. No chase, no drama. Just two ships acknowledging each other across miles of quiet sea. The merchant vessel slips away, a white triangle fading into the haze. Someone mutters that even piracy has its polite days. Small repairs, small talk with open water ahead. The crew turns to the endless chores of a wooden ship. Ropes are inspected, sails checked for fraying edges. A carpenter spends hours smoothing a stubborn splinter from the quarterdeck rail, explaining that a smooth deck keeps tempers smooth. It's hard to argue with a man holding a plain and infinite patience. Conversations drift as lazily as the ship. To sailors debate whether cinnamon improves coffee or simply disguises its bitterness. Another claims he once saw a dolphin yawn. No evidence is provided, none required. The moon rises, swollen and pale, throwing a silver path across the sea so bright it feels like a road you could walk. Roberts stands alone at the bow, coat dark against the ghostly light. He does not speak. He rarely does. Below deck, the hammocks sway in time with the ship's breath. The ocean's hush becomes a low lullaby, broken only by the occasional thump of a rope settling into its cleat. If anyone dreams, the dreams are slow and salt dash scented. As they edge farther north, the ship meets a meandering current. It nudges the hull with a lazy persistence, drawing the Royal Fortune slightly east whether she wishes it or not. Roberts adjusts the course with a shrug, noting in his log, current insistent, but not unpleasant. A sentence so mild it might as well be a weathered smile. The sailors welcome the current as a kind of free ride. Some sprawl on deck, faces turned to the sun, murmuring that even the sea wants them to rest. One afternoon, the horizon darkens with a sudden squall. The wind stiffens. The sky folds into shades of pewter. Roberts orders the sails reefed. his voice calm enough to lull a nervous gull. The rain arrives in a brief rush, warm, heavy, and surprisingly friendly. It washes salt from the rigging, cools sunburned shoulders, and fills buckets with fresh water. Within an hour, the clouds wander off, leaving the deck shining as though polished for inspection. A sailor jokes that the storm was a bath we didn't ask for, but probably needed. No one disagrees. Days later, faint shapes emerge on the far horizon. The high ridges of Hispaniola, soft as a charcoal sketch in the dawn light. The crew regards the land with mild interest, like a distant relative glimpsed across a crowded room. There is no plan to stop. Roberts prefers the open sea, and the men are content to drift onward. They pass close enough to smell a hint of earth and wildflowers, a reminder that solid ground still exists, though it feels almost theoretical after weeks afloat. Gradually, the ship curves eastward, setting a course that will, eventually and without hurry, lead back toward the broad Atlantic. The water darkens to a deeper blue, flecked with white caps that wink like distant lanterns. The breeze carries a cooler note, now a subtle promise of the wider ocean ahead. Roberts writes a final entry for the evening. Course to open sea. Crew well. Voyage continues at its chosen pace. No flourish, no drama. Just the quiet truth of a ship and its captain, content to let the world move at the slow rhythm of wind and tide. So the Royal Fortune glides north and east, a black-sailed speck beneath an endless sky. No battles, no desperate chase, only the deep hush of water and the patient companionship of men who have learned that sometimes the greatest adventure is simply staying the course. Let that sound settle. Around you now the soft creak of timbers, the long breath of the sea, and the gentle certainty that the night, like the voyage, will go on exactly as it should. Welcome back to Whispering History Nights, where the tides of history move with the speed of a thoughtful nap. If you've returned after a good night's rest, you've missed nothing alarming. The Royal Fortune remains as unhurried as ever, and Captain Bartholomew, Black Bart, Roberts continues to prove that piracy can be a surprisingly peaceful business when no one insists on drama. Tonight we slip with him and his crew from the gentle Caribbean into the broad, breathing sweep of the Atlantic Ocean. The last outline of Hispaniola fades at dawn, a smudge of green-grey swallowed by the morning haze. There is no farewell ceremony, no shouted goodbye, just the soft creak of the rudder as the ship turns her nose toward open water. The air carries a faint change, cooler, a little drier, with that wider-shown scent of faraway storms. The men notice it in silence. It's not excitement, exactly, just an awareness that they are leaving the island maze for the endless stage of the Atlantic. Roberts stands by the wheel, coat immaculate as always. He notes the new heading in his log with minimalist precision, east by northeast. Weather agreeable, crew steady, 3 short sentences, as though the vast ocean ahead were merely an afternoon stroll. Days stretch wide and almost indistinguishable. Sky and sea trades shades of blue until the horizon becomes a single, seamless line. The ship rides a steady swell, lifting and settling in a rhythm older than memory. Lanterns swing lazily. Hammocks sway in slow accord. The cook, running low on peppers and ambition, returns to simple fare. Biscuit, salted fish, and a surprisingly acceptable coffee brewed from the Dutch beans still hoarded like treasure. Someone suggests saving the last pepper for a special occasion. Another suggests eating it now, before it grows ideas. They compromise by doing nothing, which suits everyone. With no land in sight, time becomes elastic. The crew finds new ways to stretch the hours. Two sailors attempt to teach each other songs from their home ports, forgetting half the words and inventing the rest. Another carves a small wooden dolphin, explaining that the real ones refuse to pose for portraits. Roberts keeps his own counsel. He walks the deck in the evenings, eyes on the stars, calculating position with the quiet certainty of a man who trusts the night sky more than any map. His log entries remain stoically bland, wind steady, spirits adequate, nothing to remark. A masterclass in understatement. One afternoon, a pod of pilot whales surfaces alongside the ship, their sleek backs breaking the water like slow-moving shadows. The crew gathers at the rail, voices hushed as though in church. The whales roll and dive, exhaling soft clouds of mist before vanishing beneath the blue. A young sailor swears one of them winked. No one bothers to disagree. The encounter lasts only minutes, but it lingers in the quiet afterward. Even hardened pirates can be impressed by a creature that ignores them completely. Farther east, the ocean shows a different temperament. Not a storm, just a long, low swell that keeps the deck gently tilting underfoot. Rain drifts in and out like a polite guest, rinsing salt from the rigging and leaving the air cool and metallic. The crew adjusts with barely a murmur. They've grown to accept the sea's moods as part of the background, like the slow creak of wood or the faint tang of tar dot. At night the stars emerge sharper, brighter, as though the world has been polished clean. Some sailors lie flat on the deck, tracing imaginary paths between constellations, inventing new names for old lights. One insists a crooked cluster looks exactly like a bent spoon. No one can quite see it, but everyone pretends they do. Toward the end of the second week, a distant speck resolves into a merchantman bound west. Through the long glass, it shows no sign of interest, just another traveler on the endless highway. Roberts watches for a moment, then quietly instructs the helmsman to hold course. No signal, no interception. Two ships sharing the same ocean, content to remain polite strangers. A sailor comments that perhaps the merchantman will later brag about spotting the notorious Black Bart. Another replies, if they even stayed awake long enough to notice. Laughter drifts across the deck, low and unhurried. Open ocean provides ample time for the slow work of care. Ropes are tied, sails mended with small, perfect stitches. The carpenter spends an afternoon polishing the wheel until it gleams like old honey. During these quiet tasks, stories surface half-remembered tales of hometowns, of winters so cold a man's beard could freeze to his collar, of markets that smelled of baked bread and wet stone. The Caribbean heat turns those memories into something dreamlike, distant but strangely comforting. The night watchers take on a meditative calm. A single lantern glows by the wheel, its light a small island in a sea of dark. The ocean sighs around the hull, a slow percussion that never changes. Above, the Milky Way spills like powdered glass. Roberts often joins the watch, leaning against the rail with an expression that might be contentment or simply the absence of worry. He says little. The crew likes him all the more for it. Weeks pass without event, and that is exactly the point. The Royal Fortune has become less a ship than a floating piece of time, moving at the pace of clouds and currents. No cannon fire, no frantic chase, just the steady breath of the ocean and the creak of seasoned wood. When the wind shifts to the east one morning, Roberts notes it with a small nod and a single sentence in the log. Trade wind resumed. All continues. The brevity is almost poetic. So the voyage rolls on, an unbroken rhythm of water and sky. If you close your eyes, you can almost feel the deck sway beneath you. Hear the low whisper of waves sliding past. Taste the faint salt in the air. Let that sensation carry you further into rest the endless blue around you. The slow heartbeat of the sea beneath. And the quiet certainty that the royal fortune, like sleep itself, will keep its gentle course long after you have drifted away. Welcome back to Whispering History Nights, where the ocean keeps time and history keeps an even slower beat. If you've been following the royal fortune for the past several hours, you already know what to expect. A ship, a horizon, and a captain in no particular hurry. If you've just arrived, you're right on time. Nothing has happened that can't be caught in a single quiet breath. The Caribbean is long behind them now. The royal fortune has slid into the true mid-Atlantic, that broad, patient stretch where water and sky meet in a single, endless circle. Here, days are marked less by landmarks than by subtle changes of light dot. Morning arrives as a faint silver line, widening into a soft wash of blue. Evening closes it again with a slow fade, the sea reflecting every shade until you can't tell where the world ends. Roberts writes in his log, with typical restraint, latitude steady, wind agreeable, crew content enough. 3 phrases to summarize thousands of square miles. Life aboard settles into a rhythm as even as the waves. The carpenter oils the wheel each morning, though it scarcely needs it. The cook prepares a thin porridge from dwindling stores, adding a single pinch of spice as a ceremonial gesture. A few men mend shirts that have begun to resemble fishing nets. Conversation meanders. One sailor tells a long story about a goat that once followed him through the streets of Lisbon. Another insists he has perfected a method for predicting wind direction by the taste of the air. No one tests him, partly out of politeness, partly because the claim is oddly believable after so many empty horizons. Though land is nowhere near, the sea offers quiet company. Flying fish break the surface in sudden silver arcs. A school of tiny jellyfish drifts past like translucent lanterns, pulsing with faint light when the sun strikes them. At dusk, a few petrels skim the waves. Roberts watches them without comment, but later he notes in the log, birds sighted. Land not implied. A gentle reminder that the ocean plays its own private games. Navigating the mid-Atlantic is less about direction than about patience. Each night, Roberts stands by the rail with his sextant. He measures angles against the cold brilliance of stars and murmurs numbers as soft as prayers. The crew gives him space, trusting that his quiet precision will keep them on a line no chart can fully capture. Above them the Milky Way stretches in impossible clarity, a river of light so dense it seems almost solid. Even the youngest sailor falls silent, lulled by the thought that those same stars once guided Phoenician traders and Viking longships. History reduced to pinpoints in a sky that never hurries. The mid-ocean sky has moods, but rarely tantrums. Some days the light is a hard, crystalline blue that makes the deckboards glow. Other days the sun hides behind a pale veil, giving the sea a pewter calm. Rain arrives as a mist, cool and deliberate, enough to rinse the salt from the rigging before drifting away as though embarrassed. Roberts records it all with the same measured language: sea moderate, rain brief, morale unaltered. His understatement is so complete it becomes a kind of poetry. Late one afternoon, a dark shape appears on the far horizon, another merchantman heading west. It glides closer with the slow inevitability of a thought. The crew watches in comfortable silence. Roberts raises his spyglass, studies the stranger, and lowers it with a mild nod. "No need," he says. The helmsman maintains course. The other ship slides past at a mile's remove, sails catching the same forgiving wind. Two travelers sharing the same infinite road, perfectly content to ignore each other. A sailor remarks that perhaps the merchant captain will return home and brag about spotting Black Bart. Another answers, "If he could tell we were pirates at all." The exchange ends with soft chuckles that fade into the sigh of the sea. Evenings bring small reflections. Men speak of ports left behind Lisbon's narrow alleys, Bristol's muddy tides, the rough laughter of taverns now half a world away. Stories overlap, details blur. No one minds. The act of remembering is comfort enough. One sailor, carving a new handle for his knife, mutters that he's begun to dream in the rhythm of the waves. No one questions it. The ocean has a way of folding itself into thought until the mind rocks as gently as the whole days slip by. The Royal Fortune holds her steady course east-northeast. No alarms, no sudden discoveries, just the long, unbroken conversation between wood, wind, and water. Roberts writes a final note for the night. All well, no change of consequence. It could serve as the voyager's epitaph, though the voyage itself shows no sign of ending. So the ship glides onward, a single moving dot in a world of endless blue. Above, the stars watch with their usual indifference. Below, the sea keeps its patient heartbeat, and you, listening in the quiet, can let that same slow rhythm guide you toward whatever gentle rest you need. Let the sound of it settle, the faint creak of rigging, the hush of water against wood, the certainty that the ocean will keep its pace whether you notice or not. Welcome once again to Whispering History Nights, where journeys take their time, and history unfolds with all the urgency of a rocking hammock. If you've stayed with us through 9 parts of Captain Bartholomew Black Bart Roberts's long Atlantic crossing, you've proven either remarkable patience, remarkable sleeplessness, or both. And tonight, we'll bring this voyage gently to its conclusion. Following the Royal Fortune across the last weeks at sea, until she sights the distant shape of Africa, the place where Roberts's story, for better or worse, would circle back. This is the final stretch. So let's drift with them a little while longer. That vast blue emptiness continues to hold the ship for weeks. The routine has become second nature now, waking to the creak of timbers, taking meals that taste mostly of salt, watching the same horizon repeat itself with the commitment of a painter who refuses to change brushes. A sailor might rise in the morning, stretch, and ask if anything has changed. The answer is always the same. The ocean is still there, the sails still rise, and the captain is still writing his minimalistic poetry in the logbook. Winds light, no complaint of crew, day much as yesterday, that's it. Whole days captured in fewer words than most men use to order lunch. By this point, supplies have taken on that end-of-voyage quality where creativity is valued more than flavor. The biscuits are hard enough to dent a plank. The salted fish has become a philosophical exercise. You think about fresh food while chewing. You can almost pretend. The cook, perhaps feeling mischievous, experiments with mixing coffee grounds into porridge. The result is divisive. Half the crew claims it's invigorating. The other half says it tastes like regret in liquid form. Roberts, characteristically, eats in silence and records nothing about it in his log. Either he didn't care or he was merciful. The Atlantic, as always, offers variety within monotony. There are days of golden calm when the sea lies flat and shining, the ship sliding across it like a toy set loose in a mirror. There are days when fog creeps low, turning the deck into a world reduced to 20 paces in any direction. On such days, the men move more softly, as if afraid to disturb the silence. Rain comes and goes, sometimes in quick bursts, sometimes in gentle drizzles that lasts an afternoon. The rigging drips for hours afterward, every rope a slow metronome of water. Roberts continues to understate. Some rain, no concern. Ship's sound. Occasionally, the ocean reminds them they are not alone. A Dutch merchant ship appears one morning, her sails bright in the sun. For a moment, the Royal Fortune debates pursuit, but the decision fades as quickly as it forms. Roberts instructs, simply, hold course. The Dutchman sails away, none the wiser, and the pirates return to their routine. Another day, a Portuguese vessel crosses their distant horizon. Again, no chase. Perhaps Roberts is conserving energy, or perhaps even pirates understand that not every day needs embellishment. The men fill their nights with the stars. On the smoothest evenings, they lie on deck, hammocks swaying above them, tracing lines between the constellations. One sailor insists he sees a rabbit in Orion's belt. Another swears that a crooked star near the horizon is his long-lost uncle watching over him. Roberts, in his way, measures angles and notes, position checked, all in order. For the crew, these sessions of stargazing become something like prayer, not to gods, but to the quiet constancy of the night sky. Weeks later, the sea begins to change. The air grows heavier, carrying a scent both earthy and distant land, though still far away. Birds appear first, gulls and terns, flying low and restless, hinting at unseen shores. The waves take on a different rhythm, choppier, as though pushing them toward something. Roberts observes it all with that same calm detachment. Wind favors us. Land is near, though unseen. The crew, however, grows restless. After so long with nothing but ocean, the thought of coastlines, markets, and perhaps fresher food begins to gnaw at them. Their conversations grow more animated, more impatient. A man speaks of mangoes he once tasted. Another remembers a tavern in Ouida where the beer was undrinkable but the company generous. And then, one morning, there it is. Not a dramatic cliff or towering mountain, just a faint smudge of green-grey on the far horizon. Africa. The men cluster at the rail, squinting as though afraid it might vanish if they blinked too quickly. The Royal Fortune continues on her steady line, sails full, her hull cutting cleanly through the waves. Roberts notes in his log, land sighted. All remains in hand. The understatement borders on comedy, but then he was never a man for grand exclamations. As the day passes, the coastline grows clearer. Palm trees prick the sky. A river mouth can be seen winding inland, its waters brown against the blue. Villagers nestle in the greenery, their huts catching the afternoon light. The crew grows louder now, voices overlapping with speculation about trade, about provisions, about what the weeks ahead might hold. Roberts listens, but does not add his voice. He keeps his eyes on the coast, calm as ever, as though measuring not just distance but fate. And so, after nearly 2 months at sea, The Royal Fortune glides into the waters off West Africa. The long Atlantic crossing the biscuits, the rain, the whales. The silence slips behind them like a dream that refuses to resolve. For Roberts and his men, the next chapters would not be so quiet. There would be ports, there would be trade, there would be conflict and, eventually, the end of the pirate's tale. But for now, at this gentle moment, the voyage ends, not with thunder, but with the soft sight of a coastline waiting in the haze. So let's let the Royal Fortune rest here, sails slackening as she drifts near the African shore. The creak of wood, the sigh of waves, the murmurs of a weary but steady crew, these are the last sounds of this long, patient crossing. Thank you for drifting through this journey with me here on Whispering History Nights. If you've found yourself calmer, quieter, or perhaps gently asleep by now, then the voyage has done its work. And if you'd like to drift with us again through more forgotten corners of history, consider subscribing so we can keep sailing together through the strange, sleepy tides of the past. For now, close your eyes. The ocean is still there, the ship is steady, and the night, like history itself, will go on.